In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a landing page for our community using Lovable, and then taking the code of that and making smaller tweaks and edits inside of Cursor. So first thing is we're going to go over to Lovable and start our project. So I have set up my project here. So let me go to the actual project and I will show you what it looks like. So first thing first is I started by saying create a landing page for my AI community that talks about community features. The community is linked out elsewhere, but this is the landing page to share with members on how the community works. Now, one thing I did was I made this very generic, and I also talked about that the community is linked out elsewhere. So two reasons for that. One, keeping it generic is I wanted to see what Lovable would come up with for inspiration, and then I can use that to then refine everything. And then two, I said that the community is linked out elsewhere. I want to make sure and be explicit that Lovable should not be building any of the actual community features. So sometimes I feel like adding parameters around what it shouldn't do is just as important as what it should do. And then again, I made it very vague because I want to see what the general default styling is of Lovable and then work around it. Generally, if you are less opinionated, it will work with its more trained, more friendly, development friendly for Lovable. There are certain animations and stylings and kits that it uses. If you tell it explicitly, I want you to use this library, I want you to use this framework, sometimes you run into more issues just because it's not kind of their bread and butter of what they've trained everything on to work well. So kind of staying within the boundary lines of your builder definitely can give you a better result to start with. So what I did was I got that, and then it outputted a basic design. I then told it to add some spacing to improve kind of the readability of everything. I then told it I want a hero section, a problem section, I want who this is for, and then what you'll find inside, and then lastly a get started how it works section. So I talked to it about that. I then said I want the hero section to be taller, I wanted some navigation on the top, and then I added in some animation. So one thing I'm trying to do here, the goal of this is to just build out a general block of what the site can look like. And then I'll come in with code and actually make the final improvements. But I want to do the most time-saving things here in Lovable, and one of those is animation. It's generally pretty easy to add in, but again, it's just something I don't have to worry about or think about when we get into the cursor side of things. So I have the animation. Then I said I want the hero section to be more interesting. It came up with a very colored section, and then now I toned it down a little bit. I'm going to go in and actually improve this, but again, now I'm just looking for the general initial layout to get started. And then when I get to my final section here, I said, okay, this is good enough for me now to do that last 10% in actual code. I feel like Lovable does a pretty good job with landing pages to get most of the way there. Functionality, it's still struggling with certain apps and features, but again, even regardless of all of that, you still need to know the last 10% of how to take this into Cursor or just a more fine-grained editor to make these last changes to actually get it to look really good. So I can come over here and I can see the code that was generated. But to actually work with this much easier is I will publish it in Lovable, so I have it published, but then I will sync it with GitHub. So I'll just click sync to GitHub, and that will, you'll need to create a GitHub account. It'll add a project there for you. The way that you actually interact with it into Cursor is you then will get a link from GitHub to add it into your local machine with GitHub. And the easiest way that I find to work with GitHub is to use GitHub Desktop. So if you just Google GitHub Desktop, it will take you to this download link here, which then that will open up GitHub in desktop mode, so you don't have to do anything in the terminal. And how this works is you'll come up here, you'll click add, you'll clone the repository, and it'll probably find it for you in your actual list of repositories here, or you can paste that URL in of where you came from Lovable. That will get you your project going. So in this case, I have my AI Community Hub Guide. I can then open this up in Cursor, so I need to have Cursor installed. So go to Cursor, download Cursor, get everything set up there, and then you can quickly open it up. If you don't see this option, you can also just open up Cursor, and then you can open up your project folder. That will then take you into Cursor. So I will pull this up, and this is what a Lovable project will look like. So you're gonna have some React code that basically has components. So these are the components that the project was built on. So these are your kind of library template stuff that Lovable is using. So you likely will never touch these. Then you have these hooks, which this is basically just to tell the project how to handle certain situations. So we have determining whether or not it's on a mobile device, using a toast pop-up notification. Some of this is very much placeholder stuff that you may or may not need for your project, but they just include it. This is my animation code that it created. And then if you go down to the pages, this is where you actually have the website pages. So we'll have index, which is your home page, and then not found is your 404 page. Then you'll scroll down to actually getting started with this project. Is you're going to go to the package.json file, and this will tell you how this project was built and what you need to do. So the first thing you would do is you would install the, so all of these are dependencies that need to be added into your project. So you'll just run npm. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you run npm I, which installs them. So it will go in and install all of the files. You'll see this node modules folder pop up. And then the next thing you'll do is in the package.json, it will tell you how to actually run the project. So you're looking for this dev script here. So you're just going to run npm and then run dev, and that will start your development server. And you can see there it is here. You'll just command click to open it up. And this is my website now. And that's the only thing that you'll need to know as far as actually managing the code, because now when you go into Cursor, you can chat with everything else in your project. So firstly, go into the Cursor settings and you'll go to features, and you'll see that you want to make sure all of the files in your project are synced with Cursor. So that way when you're chatting with Cursor, it knows it knows what's inside your project when you're actually making changes. So now that we see that it's 100%, we can start chatting with it. In this case, I would say 99% of the time, all of your changes are going to be in the index file. So you're just going to click on that and you'll see that Cursor already has it selected for you in the chat. And then you can just start asking it questions on how to make and improve the website. Now, the reason I use Cursor instead of just Lovable for all these changes is sometimes you just want to see things live preview much faster. So here I can go into the code and I can just change like a styling, for example. So, styling or text. So in this case, maybe I want to change my gradients. So you can see what it's set up here is from purple via blue is the middle color to purple is the final color, and so you can change those there. You can also easily change text, and when I'm just changing things, you'll see that it live edits, and it's just much easier and faster to work on. I can also, with Cursor, select very specific areas that I just want to make changes to, and I can hit Command K, and in here I can talk specifically about just this section that I want it to make changes to. So again, it just narrows down what it's looking at, and it makes changes faster and more precise. And then I can also go in, and as long as you have a basic understanding of CSS styling, this is all Tailwind styling. So I can explain more on how Tailwind works, but basically you'll go through and you can look at general, you can kind of get an idea of just by reading what it is here, what things are and what it's doing. You can also hover over any of these, which will also explain what it's actually doing here. So for example, this PX, if I hover over it, that means it's applying padding left and padding right, 32 pixels on either side. So you can easily go in and say, oh, I want more or less of that padding, and I can go from 8 to 6. And then I can quickly see, what that did, if that makes any changes at all. So I like doing cursor for the final 10% of your project. The idea with Lovable is to block out kind of the general sections, and then once you feel like you're in a good place where it's saving you the most time, because I didn't have to come in and kind of set up all these different sections and make sure I kind of knew what was going to go where. I kind of do the bulk of the heavy lifting in a building tool, and then I'll come in and I'll do the last little enhancements and styling on the actual cursor side, looking at the code directly. So I'm going to make some changes, and then we'll see what the end result looks like. Okay, here's my final result. So I will show you the project, and then I will tell you how I got here. So we have the hero section. I made it a little bit more interesting. I cleaned up some of the text. I have a clear call to action. Eventually we'll have some social proof, how many members, some images, just things to be more visually stimulating as to what the experience is actually going to look like. But this looks good for now. And then we call out the problem statement. I edited the text in here. And then we have our community, what you'll find inside, and then just a simple get started. So very straightforward, but the key thing here is how do we get from the original design to this? And so I'm going to walk you through the steps that I took and just kind of guide you through my thought process, and then the action takeaways that you can use. So first thing, I just said, can we have less height on the hero section? So I was just playing around with height. I want the section below to be visible above the scroll, which I mean above the fold. And so what that is basically you have on most browsers your minimum height of your screen, and anything below that is below the fold. But in this case, I wanted to show the next section that you can preview without needing to scroll. So it indicates for people that you should continue scrolling. So we fixed that, and then I started to say that I wanted this section combined. So I just said, can we combine this? And that worked nicely. And then I cleaned up some of the layouts, and then the entire site behind the actual page itself was white, and I wanted it to be black. And so I said, can the background of the entire site be black behind the index page? What I'm meaning here is like the root of the site needs to have a black background color. So usually that's in your overarching CSS style. So I did that. So that was good. Then I had, can we have a scroll to top arrow when you start scrolling? So that got added now here. And you'll see that when it did that, it added a little bit of code specifically for the scrolling. So you can see this little bit of code here that goes in this page. Sometimes you would want this to just be in a hook file so that you can reuse it for other places. But in this case, just because we have one page, that's totally fine. And then I kept going. Now, this is where it got more interesting. I said, can we have particles on the hero section? And that's all I did was I said, can we have particles? I could have given it a specific library that I want, but again, I'm letting Cursor and specifically Claude determine what the package should be. I find that when it picks itself, if I'm not like too particular about what it is, I just go with their recommended choice. In this case, React TS Particles is one of the more popular particle libraries out there. Sometimes you'll want to stop it if it's adding like a library that is very large in size, is clearly the wrong use for a simple project, or it's overkill. You want to be aware of that, and we can talk through how that works. but it went through, added the particles, and then I said I want them to be white, add more of them, and then I want them to be behind the background. It still wasn't visible, so I said, can we make this hero section transparent so we can see it? It made the whole side transparent, and then I said, no, I just want the hero section to be transparent. And then I got down to the end of this, and you start to see this start a new chat for better results. Basically, that means it's been feeding all the history of the previous chats into the next chat, and it's running out of token space. So I started a new chat. And so the next thing I said was, I want to edit the gradient colors to be more modern. It gave me some choices. I picked the one that I liked. Then I said I want it to be more professional. Then it gave me a little bit more of styling choices. And then that was basically it. So now we're at the bottom of my chat and to this point in the site. Looking at the site, I made a few adjustments. So you'll see I removed some of the nav up here. So the nav was set up in this nav items section. And so I just removed the sections that I didn't need. And then you'll scroll down to this community section, and you'll see that when you get down to the community section, there is no text for the actual community items. So you'll see there's nothing in here, and it just has this code here that maps over my features. So if I go up to the top, you'll see this is my features list. And so we have the icon, the title, and the description. So I just changed those there to make sure that worked. I replaced one of the icons for a package. And then I just looked through the links, and I updated my link to make sure it goes to the correct community link. And that is everything for this project. So let me know if you have any questions on this implementation. One last thing I would definitely double check is just make sure everything looks good on mobile. And in this case, it looks like it's good. And we will ship this up. And the way that we do that is now you'll see in GitHub all the changes that we made. And you just talk here with a title and description of what you changed to the project. So in this case, I could just say like refinements, and then I commit it and I push it. So I'll say refinements. You can add a description if you want, you don't have to. And then I will just push it. And now that will sync with Lovable. And so when I actually go over to my Lovable project, it will have our latest changes in here. So that is how I built a landing page starting with Lovable, and then I made the final adjustments inside of Cursor, especially for things like the particles and looking at copy changes and just the layout and everything. I find this to be much faster than going back and forth with Lovable. And I think you'll find that you'll make less mistakes, and the code you'll have more options inside of Cursor as to what you can actually do. But eventually Lovable may include a lot more functionality. So for now, I take this hybrid approach and I find it to work well.